Hello, welcome. My name's Jared, and today we're going to look at the Maven Power outage challenge, specifically looking at cleaning the dataset. The dataset is over a 20-year period, and some of the data included in this is in multiple types of file formats and has lots of issues associated with it. I think it's been causing quite a few issues in the community. So this challenge started on the 9th of November, and deadline is the 10th of December, so there's only 13 days remaining. And if we look so far, I think there's only been 3 challenges submitted officially. So that's quite a lot less than what we would typically see at this stage. So let's just have a very, very brief look at the challenge itself. So we have an event level power outage data going back to 2002. But the note here is they've struggled to make sense of it due to severe issues with the data quality and integrity. So the challenge is to consolidate and clean up the raw data and create a dashboard or report to help us understand patterns and trends around outages, quantify their impact on our communities, and identify possible weak points in the grid. So that's kind of the scope, what they want to see in the final report. And then last but not least, they want us to call out any caveats or assumptions in regards to how we're sort of dealing with data quality issues or missing values. So I had a very brief look at the preview data, and when you look at the preview data, it actually doesn't look too bad. This is from 2023, which is probably a cleaner data set. So we've got date and time where an event began, when it was restored, the areas, the regions, etc., what the demand loss was, number of customers. So on the face of it, that doesn't look too bad, but I think we'll see in a few minutes that it's a lot worse than that. So before we dive into this, and before I would approach any type of data cleaning exercise, it's important to sort of ask yourself a few questions, because you can have data with multiple columns, but some of it may be irrelevant to the analysis that you want to do. And if it is irrelevant, then there's no point in cleaning it. You can just get rid of it straight away. But if there's stuff in there that's relevant, maybe to the scope of the project, those are the ones that you want to focus on. So if we relook at the scope of the report or the brief, I want to understand patterns and trends around outages. So maybe this is over time, whether it's over years or months or time frames, and that's probably up to you to decide what you think is best. Quantify the impact on our communities, so whether that's customer numbers affected or the loss of power, and then identify possible weak points in the grid. So maybe that's around like the grid sector, this sort of numeric region that we'll see in a minute. Maybe you want to identify which grids are having the most problems. So once you look at the scope and you kind of decide what your sort of end report is going to look like or what you're going to focus on, you can maybe think about, what kind of analysis am I performing? Is it based on time, durations? Are we looking at particular locations like states or regions, event types, and event severity, whether that's the power loss or people disrupted? And then maybe you want to think about then what level of detail you're going to be looking at, sort of the hierarchy of detail. So if we think about time or duration, are you only interested in the year? If you're only interested in the year, then you can pull the year out of the date and everything else is superfluous. You can get rid of it. It's quite an easy cleaning step to perform. But if you want to go down to the day, hour, or minute, then you need to be a lot more focused on your cleaning steps and trying to pull that information out. Again, if we look at locations and region, as you see in a minute, when you look at the areas that are affected, you could go to maybe either a country or a state level, if that's okay, or do you want to be able to drill down into a county level or a city level? So what type of information do you need to extract from each cell or data point? And then again, with the grid sector, so this NERC region, you got like the western states, you got like the northeast, the north or the southeast, etc. I'm not too familiar with the actual boundaries of each, but there's a number of sectors in there. And then for like severity, are we looking at individual types of events? Is it like severe weather? Is it just weather grouped into one? Is it sort of vandalism is one? Or are you looking at the sort of sub types as well? So do you want to group them at a high level, or you want to be able to drill down into the lower levels? So again, that will impact the type of cleaning or the level of detail you're going to have. And again, the same with the severity. So just to reiterate, this determines where you should focus your cleaning and transformation. And so you don't want to remove data that you're going to need, but you don't want to be cleaning and spending a lot of time cleaning data that you're actually not going to use in your report. So take a few moments before you jump in to think about what you actually need. So if I look at my plan, we'll see in a minute where we look at the worksheets. So I'm going to maybe group the worksheets by similar layouts if they have tables that are quite similar. And then we'll look at those as sort of in two groups. So one I'm going to look at is 2002 to 2010. So these are the worksheets that seem to have the most data issues. And we'll look at focusing on cleaning some of those first, and then we'll move on to 2011 to 2023. So initially, when you have lots of these different types of worksheets, you need to be able to append them together or join them together in some way. And in Power Query anyway, they need to align almost perfectly. So the number of columns in each table needs to be the same number, and their names and their order of sequence across the page need to be in the same order. Otherwise, when you join or append, they get sort of out of whack and you end up getting additional columns where you don't want them. So I want to get those lined up first. And then for this video, I'm going to look at aligning the date columns. So the date and the time for both when the event happened and when the power was restored. So I want to focus on that for this part. And then we'll create a large table that has all of the years from 2002 to 2023. Then from that, what we want to do is provide an index. So we have an event index. So each event has its own individual number. So it has its own key for that. And then what we want to do, we have our main table that's going to have our event index. We're going to have the dates and times for when an event happened and when it's restored. We're going to look at demand loss and customers. But when it comes to areas, looking at states or counties, a NERC region or an event type, some of these we'll see where you can have an event happening across multiple states or across multiple regions or having different types of events. What you want to be able to do is to link an event index to those multiple regions or multiple states. So you want to be able to have our sort of master table, and then we want to be able to link in to see these areas. So if we have 1,000 events, some of the events may be across 3 or 4 states. So you want to be able to count the number of states that are being affected. So I'm going to look to try and structure this. So what I'm going to look at today is creating this main table and then creating these subsets of tables, but I'm not going to clean the NERC region and the area and the types of events. I'll maybe try and do that in a second part to this video. Okay, so let's look at the data itself. So again, we've got this Excel table where we have each year from 2002 to 2023. You may have seen yourself if you look at these. There are different file formats, but typically between 2002 and 2010, they're kind of a similar format. And then when we go into 2011, it becomes a bit more structured. The earlier years, it's less structured. There's more issues associated with it. But as we get on into 2021 and 2023, we settle into this sort of quite a structured table that should be relatively straightforward to clean and manipulate and transform. But what I've done here, and what I recommend you do when you're looking at this type of stuff, is to try and group the years together and maybe look at the headings on each sort of data point. So 2002 to 2010, we've got 8 columns. Now we've got our date, NERC region, time, etc. We've got this one that I've highlighted, which is restoration time, but it's actually a date and a time. It's not just a time. And if we go to 2011, 2014, you see I've highlighted here, we have date of restoration and time of restoration. So this is actually being split out into 2 separate columns here. And then we move on to 2015 to 2022. We have the 2 additional columns. One is month and one is alert criteria. And then finally 2023, we have yet another column. It's called event year. So we've got the month, year, and the alert criteria. So because we have these different sort of formats for each of the years, what we want is a common format, common number of columns that we can use for all of our years. So what I decided to do was in 2015 to 2023, we have these additional columns for month and year. They're not really needed because we have the dates in each table already. So we can sort of derive the year and the month if we need to from those columns. We don't need separate standalone columns. But we have this alert criteria, which has been added, and it may be useful. So what I'm proposing to do is we'll add in an alert criteria, even though it's going to be a null value for the earlier years, but it means then we can capture the data from the later years. So this is kind of my summary down below. So we've got our range, year ranges here. So we want the date of the event beginning, the time, then we want our date of restoration, time of restoration, area affected, numeric region, alert criteria, etc. And again, I'm highlighting here for 2015 to 2023. We have those columns already. There's nothing really that we need to do apart from maybe just checking the data to make sure that it's in the correct format. 2011 to 2014, again, it looks fairly in order. The only issue is we don't have alert criteria. So N means we don't have it, so we're going to have to add that one in. 2002 to 2010 is the one where we have an issue. The C here means that maybe the name of the column is not the same as the others, so we want to be able to change the name of the column so the lines. And S is sort of a split, so we're splitting the restoration time into a date and a time. And again, we're adding that alert criteria. So this is going to be our final structure of our sort of composite table. It's going to have 10 columns in that order and have that. Okay, so let's get stuck into actually doing the cleaning. So what I've done here, I'll show you in a minute how I did it, but what I've done is I've pulled each of the worksheets into Power Query itself, and I've split them up, sort of aligning with this sort of format, or this date range of 2002 to 2010, 2011, 14, 15 to 2022, 2023, so that I can clean them sort of in a common way for all of them and then sort of stitch them together. And also, there's one other thing to sort of consider. So when you bring this data in, because of the way it's structured, if I go back to 2002, we have just a single table here, but in 2003 there's sort of different tables, 2 or 3 tables in one, and then all of this sort of stuff at the bottom. So when you have the option to either bring in the worksheet as a standalone, just the worksheet is on its own, and I think when this loads there'll be the option of bringing in the table. So for the earlier years, because there's multiple tables per worksheet, so if I go down here, let me just drag this across. So there's there's a possibility to bring in 2002. I'm not sure what that error is, but here you can potentially bring in one table for 2002, but when it comes to 2003, you'll have multiple tables, so then you'll have even more worksheets or more tables to deal with. So what I decided to do was for the early years, for 2002 to 2010, just bring in the worksheet as a whole, but for the later years, post 2011, then I brought them in as a table, because when you bring it in as a table, it's a bit easier to deal with. It's kind of, there's a bit more formatting done behind the scenes, cleaning it up and things like that. So if you can't bring it in as a table, it's going to be easier, bring it in as a table, otherwise bring it in as a worksheet. Oops. Okay. So in the interest of time, I'll do initial cleaning steps for like 1 year, so for 2002, and show you how to sort of manipulate and clean this initially, and then I'll apply it for all of the others. I'll sort of pause it and I'll apply it for the others, then I'll just show you again. Okay, so here what we want is on row number 2, we've got the date the time, etc. So we want to be able to bring those up. So what I want to do first is remove blank rows. I think I'll do that, and then we want the date up here. So we're just going to transform, use for first row as headers. So we've got that kind of out of the way here. And then we want to rename some of these. So we want to call this area affected. And I think this is just going to be restoration rather than restoration time. So that's kind of literally it for the first table. And so I'll pause it and I'll do it for the remaining tables. And then what we'll do is come back and join these, and then we'll start doing the proper cleaning. Okay, so for these, what I've done is, again, same sort of format, promoted the headers to give our headers in the top, and then what we needed to do, there was one of the columns here, number of customers affected, it had that sort of little 1 at the end, so we wanted to remove that so we have the same column heading, and that was kind of the same throughout. So again, it was just promoting the headers into our column headers, and just renaming one of our columns so that they all have the same title, number of customers affected. So for each of our years, it's kind of what we've done here. 2008, 2009 as well, and then 2010. So now we have these 8 or 9 years. What I want to do is then append these together into a new. So we go to home and we say append as new, and we want 3 or more tables. So we want 2002. I'm going to move that down. Say OK. So the first thing we want to do is just identify the dates. So each of our dates should have a / on it. Everything else is just kind of notes, or it's the name of a month, etc. So what we need to do is convert this to text first, and then we will text full contains, and then we say /. So now we should have just dates assigned here. We've got a / on here somewhere. So we're picking that one up. But I think if we then look at a second filter, we go down to the bottom, there's one in here, so we can just turn that off. So we should now have a table that's only got sort of dates where an event began, and that's just included here. So now we have 8 columns, which is what we wanted, with 800 rows. And what I just want to show you is that if I want to just convert this to a date, if we go to transform, we have this option to just parse from the date here, and you'll see here this little red thing, there's an error, there's a few errors somewhere along, and you can just like scroll down and see there's one here where it's got 119.05. I think there might be one other, which is this one. It's got 2 /. I think everything else is kind of clean. So what I want to do is just undo that. If I do a quick replace on double / for a single /, and then I think the other one was 119.05. I think it's supposed to be January 19th, 2005. So if I say 19th January 2005, and I convert that, now if I attempt to parse this date, then we get our first sort of cleaned column, which is our dates. So what do we want to call this? We want to call it date event began. Okay, so we kind of got our first column cleaned up here, and what I want to do is I want to add a column, but what I want to do is I want to extract the year. You'll see in a minute why, but I want to use the year because in our restoration column, some of our data doesn't have a year value. It just has like a day and a month, so you want to be able to use that year later on. And for time, if we look at this, we have this is kind of, because in Excel generally the date starts from 1900 for some reason. Then if there is no date but you convert it to a date time, it kind of goes back in time to this 1899, so you get this kind of weird looking data format. And then we've got other sort of mixed time types where it's AM and PM using the A dot M dot. I think that's quite a lot of what we have, and there's probably, we have a couple of other ones in here like approximately, evening, midnight, NA, and ongoing. So what I'm thinking for this is for NA and ongoing, we change we basically remove this. So if it's NA, it's not considered anything, so we maybe just change it to null. If it's ongoing, I can't understand why something would be ongoing if it happened sort of 20 years ago. So this is probably a mistake where it's ongoing, it hasn't been updated. So we'll maybe remove that as a null. Midnight, we can change it to midnight time. Evening, you can probably either remove this or you can make an approximation and say 6 p.m. or something like that. And we want to remove approximately. Okay, so the first couple of things we'll do is we'll remove ongoing and NA. So if we just we have to convert this when we want to remove stuff. We have to convert it to text first of all. So we want to replace. No, we could do this in writing M code, but sometimes it's easier just to do this interactive. It's easier to do really. And we want to go ongoing. There's probably a few more steps when we do this. Sorry. And we want to replace approximately. Space with nothing. Evening, I'm thinking I might just make I'll make an assumption here and just say 6 p.m. And I think the other one that we had was midnight. So we got midnight. Let's just make sure we haven't got anything else up here. We get 12 noon. Okay. So midnight. Sorry. What we want to do here is transform this format uppercase, just in case we're using a small m, capital M, etc. If it's all uppercase or all lowercase, it's easier to deal with. So we want to replace midnight with 12:00 a.m. and we want to replace noon with PM. So if we look at this now, we should have just times. Okay. And then what we want to do is we want to remove our either, you might call it a period or a full stop, so we want to remove those as well. So you remove those. So now we should just have times in here. So again, what we can look to do is, even if it doesn't work here, but we can just use this parse function for the time. And we see that we're getting an error. So there might be there might be one or two errors in here. Let's just have a quick scan on to see. I think there might be, yeah, so there's one here where it says 5:78 p.m. So we're not sure exactly what that is. We could make an assumption or change it to something else like 5:18, or we can remove it because we don't know what it is. What I think I might do on this one, let's just see if there's any others. I don't think there's any other errors. So if we click here, we'll see we've got it on the rows, but we've only got one error. So this is the only error. So as a shortcut, we can just say we want to replace this error, and we can just say null if we want to remove this. Again, you can manipulate that and maybe change it to 5:58 or something like that if you feel that that's better. But we can remove that. So second step achieved. So now we have the date the event began, and we also now have the time the event began. So next we move on to what is probably the most difficult column in the whole data set. It's the restoration date and time. Because if we look at this, we have sort of dates, we've got this sort of normal date time structure in here. But if we go down here, we've got sort of shortened dates with commas and times. We've got text in here. We've got then time with a date, a month's date and a day, but no year. So we've got multiple different types of date formats. So it's kind of a little bit all over the place in terms of how it's formatted. Sometimes we have a full year, sometimes it's just the 2 digits. So there we go, 7/25/04, 7/25/2004. So, and if you look at it in a bit more detail, you'll find some places we have double spaces or single spaces. Sometimes there's no space between the AM and the time. So it's really just a messy column and it calls for something particularly special to clean this, because you could in theory just strip everything out into multiple columns and then rebuild it, but I'm going to show you probably a simpler way. It's got quite a big calculation that we can copy and paste into Power Query, but it's going to clean this right up. Okay, so first we want to convert this to text. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to create a new column. So a custom column called restoration 1. And we're going to say if restoration equals null, then null, else. Sorry, I forgot there was one minor item that I want to do here. So what I want to do is, if you looked at this, you'll see that there's no spaces between our text. And the reason for that is in our data, some places we have double spaces, some places we have single spaces, some places there's no spaces. So what I want to do is to replace any space with no space. So we're creating a single sort of text string for each of these. So our format will be sort of condensed, and our text string will be condensed, and we just have a single string with no spaces. And then I want to create this new column. So restoration 1. restoration equals null, and null, else text contains if restoration contains /, then restoration, else, if here, else we want the restoration and the year. So basically, if there's no date here, then just return a null. If our text contains a date format like this, like a standard date format that we usually see, then just return it. But if there is no date format, so it's talking about like here November, there's no / here, then return this plus the year after it. Yes, what I forgot to do here was on the year, we can't join a text and a number, so we want to convert this to text. So I'll just go back a step and insert a step converting this to text, and then we go forward again. So for that one we get 12 p.m. November 10, 2002, although it looks pretty unreadable there. What we can now do is apply this. So I'm going to copy all. And now we convert this to text first of all. And then we add our custom column. We call this restoration 2. And we cross our fingers. So now we have restoration 2. So if we go down here, these all look the same, but you'll see now where it says 12 p.m. November 10, 2002. Now we've got 10th of November 2002, 12 p.m. in that kind of format. And if we keep going down, we'll see if we can find a few more instances like that. It's showing an error somewhere. I'm sure we'll find an error somewhere. Again, 7 a.m. September 14th. 14th of September 2007, 7 a.m. So let's see if we can find where this error is lying. So here's the error here. So this date, 18th to 3rd of 4:12 a.m. So we got this 12 a.m. that wasn't picked up earlier. So I'll maybe just go back a few steps and do a replacement on that. So we've got, let's see if we can find it in here. We've got 12. Yeah, oh yeah. There it is there, 12 a.m. So we just need to replace that with 12:00. Okay. So we'll insert a step. Okay. And now if we just go back to our add a custom and we move across. Okay, so we should have this all here. Okay. Okay, next we want to extract the date and have a separate column just with, not the date, sorry, the time. But we have a few instances where there is no time assigned. There's only 1 or 2, but in the interest of trying to keep this as accurate as possible, we'll create a conditional custom column. So we'll say this is called restoration time. Where's the time of restoration? Time of restoration. Let's keep it right. So if 6 contains restoration 2, so basically if we have a time component, or we can just use the colon, then we want the time from restoration 2. Else we have nothing. We can have 1 or 2 errors there. I forgot on this. So we say if restoration 2 equals null, then null. Else if space. So we always, if you got a null for some reason, you have to put null. Well, not for some reason, just for the follow the logic. The null comes first always. Now we just convert this to time. So every time restoration. And for this one, we just want to transform this and parse for the date only. So now that we have that, we can remove the sort of helper columns that we had. So we want to remove those columns. Restoration becomes date of restoration. And we want to move these to the beginning. So we now have our 4 main columns for these initial years. So these are the sort of the dirtiest ones that we need to clean up. So we're sort of step 1 done, clean these up. So what I'm now going to do is just reorder these columns, make sure they're named appropriately, and then we'll move on to the next ones. So we want to have area affected, numeric region. Okay, so numeric region comes here. You want alert criteria event types. Any type of disturbance becomes event type, and demand loss. And this becomes demand loss. And number of customers affected, that's fine. So we need alert criteria. So we need to add a column called alert criteria. So this is just going to be a blank column. So we can just add a column and type in null, and it'll just give us a blank column. And move that back in there. So we got our numeric region, area criteria, event type, demand loss, number of customers affected. So just make sure this is okay. Okay, so if you followed along so far, congratulations. You're probably over the hardest part of this cleaning process. So we have these 4 columns, then we have everything else kind of aligned. We've got our 10 columns with 800 rows for those first 8 or 9 years. Okay, so next what we want to do is to do the remaining. So we move on to 2020 2023, this is quite simple. So we just want to remove the year and the event month. Again, if we look here, we've got date event began, time, data restoration, time restoration, area affected, numeric region alert criteria, event type, demand loss, number of customers affected, so that's okay. And then if we move back to these ones, so we want to remove the months. I think we have everything kind of taken care of here. It's just a matter of removing the months, because if we look back, the columns are kind of lining up, so we don't really need to continually check these. So I'll just pause this while I remove the month from everything. So remove those, so I'm on to the last one. So 2015, I want to remove the month. So again, we've got our 10 rows lined up here. And then 2011, these need to be cleaned up a little bit more. So you've got a date, event, data restoration, time restoration. I think the only thing that we don't have here, if we look back here, is area affected, numeric event type. So we need the alert criteria. So what we can maybe do is just join these all together. And then what we want to do maybe here is just get rid of these dates that are being the sort of the column headers that we have. So convert this to text, and then we can filter for just text contains / as a date component. So I'll get rid of our kind of null rows. And then what we need to do is just add a column for alert criteria. Oops. Again, just null. And alert criteria just between numeric and event type. We got an additional alert criteria. Did we have? I think maybe I added this earlier. Okay. So we can probably just get rid of this. I think it was already added. Let's delete this table. Sorry about that. Sorry about that confusion. So I think I added an alert criteria for each of these already. So it's already in here. So we've got it's been reordered, so it's in the correct. So for each of these, if you haven't done it, you can either join them and put them together, or for each table, what I did here was just add in a custom similar, just alert criteria null, and then just reordered it, so moved it to the middle for each of these. So you got our alert criteria. So you've got 10 rows, 10 columns for 2011 through to 2023. So what we can do here is create a new table. So 3 or more. So you want 2011 through to and we want to move this down. Okay, so we've got our 10 rows lined up here. So we can call this 2011 to 2023. First thing we can do is convert this to text and then filter where it contains /, the one we showed before. Okay, so we'll convert these all to text initially. Okay, so we want to convert this date event began into just a date, but we've got a bit of a mixture of dates and times. And also, I think if we look back here, you'll see that there's different formats. So this goes from 25th of September 2016, and then it changes to the different format. It shows the month and then the day. So what we have in here is not as bad as these early years, but it's similar in that we have different date formats, and then we also have dates and times formats. But luckily, that's because it's not as bad as the previous one. We just have kind of like it's either a day or a month, and then a day or a month, then a year, and then we get a space and then time. So what we can do is something a little bit simpler here. What we can do here is just to transform here. We want to extract before delimiter. So we want to remove that time component. We can just say we want to keep everything before our space. So all the times kind of disappear from us. So we don't have the times, we just have the dates. But we still have the issue in that we have multiple different date formats. So this one is slightly easier, and this is probably better to explain what we have. So if our text contains, it's just an if statement. So if we've got a date component where we've got this sort of /, we want to take the date from our text field. So from the date event began. So we either have a day, month, year, and then return like a UK version of a date format. Or we have a date and then we have percentage mark, etc. So again, not as many varieties, but we're just covering all the bases. So all the different types of iterations or permutations that we can think of, we're kind of listing here. So this one is looking at where we have a day first, and then different month components. I think actually we can probably get rid of some of these. I think this is day, month, day, month. I think these are all kind of the same, are they? Yeah, so I think we can probably just get rid of these to make it even simpler than what it was. And I think these are all the same because I've got rid of a time component, so we don't need all of these. So yeah, even easier. So we're going to create a new column using this as a statement, and I think I didn't mention before, I'll save these and maybe give a link to them in my Google Drive so you can download them and use them if you need to. Alright, so add a column, custom column. So date event began to, and so we've got a date here. Now we convert this to a date, and then we just move this back to the start, to the beginning. We can delete this, remove. I think on the time aspect, I think it's time is much easier because there's not too much in the way of different formats. So I think on this one we can just parse the time. Sorry, I didn't mean that, should have been not add column, transform column. So just parse the time here. So again, just checking here, if we profile the entire data set, we can see if we've got any errors. So there's no errors. So we have our date event began and the time event began sorted here. And then for data restoration, I think the only thing we need to look at is ongoing and unknown. So we can replace these as ongoing, unknown, unknown. So we can replace these as null values. And then we can just replicate the step that we did for date event began. We can do that again here just for this to clean it up. I think we've got two unknowns. I think there might be some trailing spaces. So here we'll just trim and clean. And then we want to replace ongoing with null. And unknown is null. And we want to, extract before the delimiter. So we want to extract and we probably want to use this again, but instead of, so let's get a new text file, copy, paste, and what we want to do is rename this so date of restoration. So we want to add a column. Date restoration 2. Pop that in. Go to data restoration. Convert this to a date. So we get 0 errors on this, so that's good. Again, we'll move it across. Okay. So we can delete this column. And then our final one here is the time of restoration. So again, there might be a few text items to replace. So ongoing, unknown, unknown. Again, we'll just to get rid of that, trim and clean. There might be a trailing space in there somewhere. This with null. Unknown, replace with null. And then we transform this by just parsing the time. So there we go. We have our date event began, time, data restoration, time of restoration. We got 10 columns. We've got that for 2002, 2010, 2011, 2023. We can, if you want, append these two tools. So 2011. 2002, 2010, 2011 to 2023, so we have our 10 columns going from 2002 to 2023. We'll rename this, you can call it whatever you want. I'll just say full table, maybe. I'll move this into our final folder. What you might want to do is refresh. I'm just going to save this. Slide there. So there's a thunderstorm going overhead. So I'm afraid that the power is going to go out. So what I wanted to do here was to add an index column. So index column from 0. Okay, remove this back to the beginning. What you might want to do now that you've created these full table, if we're not going to be looking at these other tables, you can just like turn off, well, the best thing is to turn off enable load for all of these, so you don't have to load them into your workspace. And then maybe you don't want to, we're not necessarily needing to refresh our data. So you might want to turn that off, because then that might make it a little bit more efficient. So we've got our full table, we've got our index, we've got our 10 columns, so we've got 11 columns in total. We've got our dates and times cleaned. The next thing that we said we might want to do is that we've kind of got the guts of this table. I know we need to look at demand loss and customers, adjusting those. But what we want to do is use this table to create these subtables for our numeric region, area, and event type. So we don't want to reference this because we're going to do some maybe potential modifications here by removing some columns, etc. So what we might want to do is just duplicate this 3 times. Call this numeric table. State table. And event table. Okay, so for numeric table, we just want the index and the numeric region, so we can remove all the columns. So I'll have to talk over the lightning storm that's going overhead. And for the state, we just want the index and the area affected, so we'll remove other columns. And for event, we want the index and the event type, and we'll remove other columns. And because we have those separate tables, we don't necessarily need, you can keep them if you want, but we don't necessarily need the areas affected, the numeric region, and the event type in here anymore, so we can actually remove those columns from this table just to keep it a bit trimmer. Okay, so what we have now is we have our full table with our index, time, dates, other criteria, demand loss, and customers affected. I'm going to come back in the next part and clean these up. And then we also have our numeric table. So again, we have our index, so we're linking back to our full table. We've got our index and our numeric region. So we have, sometimes we have multiple regions. So again, we want to come back and maybe just clean this up a little bit. So we know some of these ones just need to be tidied up a little bit. State, again, that needs to be tidied up. What I want to do is drill down into the state level rather than maybe counties. So I've got this table that I've just got from Wikipedia, just the state name and the state abbreviation, and we're going to use this as kind of a lookup to identify the states that are in each. So like sometimes you may have think if we go down here, you might have North Carolina, Northern Virginia, you might have multiple states being impacted by each event. And then our event, we want to look at the types of events happening and maybe group them together, like electrical system separation. Maybe we want to group these into like a similar type of event type. So that's going to be the next part, but I think for now we have what we need to start looking at some analysis over time, even if you just want to look at the number of, if you want to look at the number of events over time, when they started, when they began, durations, times, dates, whether they happen in a particular month or a particular season or a particular time of day, you should be able to do at least that analysis now. And then if we come back in part 2, we'll have a look at the demand loss and the number of customers affected, as well as the numeric region, states, etc. Okay, so I'm going to save this and then close and apply it. And if I come into my model, so it's kind of what I wanted was, we have states probably over here somewhere. It's not really needed, but we have our full table, and we have our connected, our state table, our numeric table, and our event table, all through our index. So our index is connected to all of these. So we have our model kind of already formed for our analysis when we come back and clean these. Okay, so I hope you find that beneficial. We've kind of recreated this model layout. So again, as I say, part 2, hopefully coming in the next day or 2, where we come and clean up this part of our analysis and our demand loss in customers. And then that should enable you to do whatever type of full analysis that you want to do. Okay, hope this is of use. If you have any comments or other ways that you think this could be done in a more efficient manner, I'm sure it can be done using Python and other things like that. But my main purpose here was to try and show how to do this just using the user interface and maybe a few sort of tricks or tips using the M code in Power Query. Okay, so hopefully this allows you to start doing some work on preparing a challenge, and I'll see you on part 2.